Hello, everyone. My name is Wayne Terryberry. I'm the Outdoor Recreation and Natural Lands Coordinator in the Department of Athletics and Recreation at McMaster University. And I know with spring here and the warm weather arriving, many of us are eagerly awaiting the opportunity to get outside, enjoy parks and trails. Well, recognizing though that the openings of parks and trails will be determined by the provincial government and health units. I'm really fortunate though to get some insight today from three trail and park professionals who are joining me today to give us some insight on the how trails and parks will reopen and some of the challenges and opportunities that COVID-related closures have created for park and trail managers. But before we begin, I'd like to start with a couple of acknowledgements. I'd like to say that McMaster recognizes and acknowledges that all our lands at the university are located on the traditional treaty areas of the Mississauga and the Haudenosaunee peoples and nations, and they're within the lands of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Secondly, I know I and everyone here on this call would like to acknowledge the healthcare workers and practitioners in the province and nationally who are keeping us safe and doing so much to assist us in this time of pandemic issues and closures. So on behalf of everybody, I'd like to thank them. To begin, I'd like to do some introductions. First of all, we have Terri LeRoux, who's the Senior Manager of Parks for Credit Valley Conservation and also the President of Ontario Trails, or Hike Ontario. Sorry. Hi, Terri.
Hi, good morning.
Yeah. And secondly, we have Paul Ronan, the Executive Director of the Ontario Parks Association.
Hi there, everyone.
And we also have Patrick Connor, the Executive Director of the Ontario Trails Council.
Morning, everybody. Nice to see you.
So to begin, I'd like to start with Terri. Recognizing that so many Ontarians use conservation areas owned and managed by conservation authorities, how are these conservation authorities managing conservation area closures, and how do you see an eventual reopening unfolding?
Thanks, Wayne. Yeah, so conservation authorities, there's actually 36 different authorities across the province. Many who are not close to populated areas have had the ability and I think leisure a little bit to take a disciplined approach to how they're managing this. And they've been able to leave, for the most part, trails open for passive use. In the Greater Toronto Hamilton area, that is a vastly different story. We were necessitated to react very quickly. So following, I believe it was the March 17th emergency declaration, we had intended a lot of the different CEAs to keep some trails open. And unfortunately, that was not possible due to the volumes of visitors. And I'm sure everyone may have or could search now to see the visuals of the volume of vehicles and people at Conservation Halton Parks. Which necessitated a middle of the day full closure of all their parks on a Sunday afternoon when they were packed, over capacity, had to close the gates and usher people out. And from there, it was a pretty quick rollout across the GTA of conservation authorities making the same decisions. So in addition to park amenities being closed, all of the trails were closed. And it really came down to a vast and unprecedented increase in visitor volumes and a lot of visitors who were not your normal trail users. So maybe not understanding of trail ethic, expectations of behavior. And so they were engaging in a lot of unsanctioned behaviors, trespassing where they shouldn't be, tromping and stopping over sensitive areas, starting fires. So it was a very unfortunate reality. So the majority of the conservation area trails in the GTA have been fully closed. In respect to reopening, we are trying to coordinate as best as we can a rollout so that the public messaging is as clear as can be, and we're not all dealing with that confusing messaging of some CA trails being open, some remaining closed. The overall approach will be to reopen trails for passive use when the government initiates or announces under that stage 1 restart phase. So we'll see. We're expecting we'll get about a two-day notice. The other consideration for us is that parks can't open just like that. So a 2-day notice is not enough time for us to prepare the parks, to remove the barriers, the fencing, the signage, to do the trail liability checks, the hazard trees, to train our staff that we need to call back on new safety protocols. So we're envisioning overall about a 7 to 10 day window from the provincial announcement to when we will actually be ready to safely welcome people back to the parks.
Hey, thanks, Terry. That's very interesting and really helped me understand the situation that park managers are facing and what we have to do to get reopened. Paul, I'm going to ask you more about urban parks. You know, everybody in municipalities enjoy the many great urban parks we have available in our areas. How is COVID impacting park management for municipalities?
Well, thanks, Terry. Great question. We had very similar experiences to what Terry mentioned in our urban parks because people were forced to be inside. When they did get out for some exercise, we very quickly saw the value that they place on the outdoor green spaces and our green infrastructure. What happened initially was people came out to our park, and it was the physical distancing that became the issue right away, where people were excited. They needed to get out, fresh air. They wanted to walk. They wanted to get exercise. It was going to help their physical and mental state, not to mention the added complication that all of their children now were not going to school and were at home. So there had to be some means of providing some healthy physical and mental exercise, and getting outside was obviously an option for them. The problem was the volumes of people that we found gathering in specific areas of the park, like playgrounds. Playgrounds were one of the first ones that came to our attention, mostly because the children flocked to the playground, and obviously the parents were with those children. And so almost immediately we saw an issue there. The other issue was, as Terry mentioned, on trails or trailheads, and also parking lots. Parking lots became a place where people would drive to the park, and of course physical distancing with cars parked right up tight, and the capacity of the parking lot to handle the volume just wasn't there. So that was initially what we found, and unfortunately the behavior of some of the patrons to the park was such that they didn't seem to fully heed the government request for physical distancing. And because of that, it forced us to do what seemed like quite drastic measures to eventually cordon off the playgrounds, and in some cases picnic areas and benches, because people have just an automatic default to going to the park and sitting down and talking and communicating and socializing. And I think what we've realized through this is just how important those outdoor amenities in our park spaces are to the health and well-being of all our citizens.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I agree. I think we're seeing a lot of growing interest and recognition of the importance of green infrastructure and outdoor recreation opportunities, as we're seeing the how important it is for people at this time. And how do you expect, Paul, to see the reopening? Will it be somewhat similar to what Terri had mentioned?
Yeah, Terri talked about, anywhere from a 5 to 7 day startup. I don't know how many days it will be with us, but it could be very similar. It will certainly be a phased in approach. There's 444 municipalities. And as Terri mentioned early in her comments, it was a bit of mayhem at the beginning, because what we found was 444 municipalities had 444 different interpretations of how things should be done. And it was truly remarkable how different the policies were being implemented in each different municipality across the province. And that certainly was problematic. One municipality would do something one way and another would do it a different way. And then social media, you saw that. Why are they doing it? We're not. So that was a big problem. So when we do our startup, it will be phased in. It should be noted that certain amenities like baseball diamonds, the infield, the outfield, our parks, our playground surfaces, they are still being maintained at a very base level. And the reason for that is because if we let them go, the cost to bring that asset back up into an acceptable minimum standard would be astronomical. And so that work continues. And what will happen is, as the province releases the five-person being together rule, once that is lifted, we will then have to do some monitoring. We will have to do pretty extensive media messaging. There will be a lot of public education that you're going to see both in signage and on the media and in council meetings. And I think you'll see that the one thing I would also say is the weather has actually helped us a little bit, because we've only had a few of the really nice days. And once the weather gets consistently better and we have the sun and the warm days, it's going to be very difficult to control the distancing. So we're planning for that. We are bringing back staff as things free up, and but there will definitely be a staged-in approach, and as soon as permits are allowed to be granted, then of course we will bring staff back and have them ready to support those permits. So there's an awful lot involved. I think it was Terri that said you don't just turn the light switch on. There's a lot of steps before that light switch gets turned on, and that's what the planning is. The planning for that is being done as we speak right now.
Thanks, Paul. That's really good information to know. It gives us a lot of understanding of the realities and the situations in urban parks and the areas in the cities and that. I'm going to ask Patrick, recognizing that there are thousands of trails in Ontario, what have you been hearing from Ontario Trails members and associates, like from the management and user perspective on this?
Well, thanks for the opportunity to answer a very complex question, because we're really dealing with 41,000 kilometers of trail, and Paul alluded to the number of communities, 430 communities across 28 different activity groups. Trails are complicated at the best of times. Trail user behavior is complicated. We're a no conflict education organization. We've always said expect and respect other users, and I think this COVID experience has been you know, the best of times, the worst of times. It's been the best because for years we've been saying, in conjunction with the three partners on this call and others, that we view trails as an essential service. And I think COVID and the provincial orders that see walkable access and access to parks in public lands has really demonstrated the essential nature of trails and trail-based activity. It's been really problematic with not all trails are closed, and they're not closed in all different jurisdictions. You know, both Terri and Paul are right. You know, Terri, there was a gradual closure across conservation authorities, but for example, the trails in Chatham-Kent never closed. Why didn't they close in Chatham-Kent? Well, what they discovered in Chatham-Kent was that their user behavior, people were practicing social distancing. They had the measures in Chatham-Kent, either through the Trails Council or the Park and Recreation Department, to get out and monitor people's behavior on the trails, so people's behavior didn't become problematic. As Ontario Trails is involved with 80,000 followers on a whole variety of social media, we've seen two types of individual. The uneducated individual, the new user, who, as Paul was saying, you know, the mental health and the physical benefits in your local park and on your local trail has really inspired new users. But we've also seen some misbehavior from the most experienced user, who traditionally, you know, we've worked very hard to promote trails and make people aware of where they are. Well, now they know they're there, they just don't know whether they're open and closed. And Paul made the statement about communicating. We have to get the communication right going forward around the reopening, Wayne and Terri and Paul are, you know, you're all right, because it's very difficult for the non-user or the experienced user to reconcile in their head, stay home, go out, right? That's really the message that's been coming. And so there's a learning curve on, well, if I do go out, how should I behave? Do I wear a mask? How far is the particulate drops? I mean, it can either be 3 feet, 6 feet, 12 feet. What kind of speed are you going at? We've run into issues, Wayne, where walkable access, people are interpreting as, my trail trip is okay. I'm a cyclist, but the emergency order didn't say cycling. So you see, when you talk about 28 different use groups, you know, you get nature lovers, you get bird watchers. All of a sudden, you've got this growing pent-up demand. The longer this goes on, the more that people are going to want to go out. And I think our message really is, we have to work with public health. The first thing OTC did is we reconnected with all the public health units and we asked them, what's your messaging? And I said, well, we're following the Government of Canada guideline. So we've populated our trail pages with the public health messaging, and municipalities and other jurisdictions are following the lead of public health. Public health is really the one that's going to determine the opening. I think it's the user behavior that's going to determine how long they stay open or if they close. And I think that's where the education message and getting to the various use groups or through municipal park and recreation, you know, the leadership of all your groups is really going to be paramount. You know, let's get one message down right. We've really got to not confuse the user with a stay home, go out type of messaging going forward.
Thanks, Patrick. That's great messaging there. And I'm just going to finish up with one quick question for everybody. And Patrick, you alluded quite a bit to this, but how can trail users ensure that there's a safe and positive experience for everyone in parks and trails? What are some things that we can all do to make sure this works and that these all stay open when they do open?
That's an excellent question. What we also did is we tried to identify very early on who's open and who's closed. And Terri was talking about concentration of users, right? The concentration of use, if certain assets are closed and now you're going to increase the population. Paul's absolutely right. We've got to work to control these points where people are gathering in groups of 5 or more. I think we have to be clear about and use technology to say who's on the trail, where and when. We have to engage in some dispersal of users. We have a rich inventory, 6,600 trails on the Ontario Trails Council website by activity and by type. We have to do a better job. We can't be stacking people. We have to be spreading them out. And I think we need to use tech. We can use people's cell phones to ping, to say, I'm here. Well, of trails, how many people can it hold? Similar to arenas or pools, or your local legion or dance hall, right? They have capacity, and I think this is the time for better user management and management science for trails, so that we can actually know what's open, what's closed, how many people are there, and where I can go. The how to use it, we could litter the countryside with, when you're on this trail, here's how you should use it in the social distancing and public health ways. But we've really got to do a better job at traffic and population management.
Great.
That'd be
Thanks,
my
Patrick.
recommendation. I don't know how that unfolds, but it's
great thoughts and great ideas, and we all need to work together on this. Terry, do you have any thoughts on what trail users and park users can do?
Sure. Patrick made some excellent points. I think the visitor dispersion is critical, and it can't just be dependent on the management agencies to implement strategies. The users themselves have to be willing to not go to places that they normally go to if they know it's busy or they're contributing to a problem. I think one of the other pieces too is that trail users need to be adaptable and really deeply understand and accept the fact that their traditional trail experience is likely to change. It will change in the immediate future, and it may change moving forward. And what I mean by that is there will probably be a lot of CAs and managed parks that implement a book your visit or a timed stay approach, one-way trails. So a lot of mitigation measures to keep everybody safe. And I think it's going to take some reframing in people's own minds about how they interact with the local natural green spaces and trails.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. You're right. We need to re-envision how we do this, because things are at a very unique time and experience for everyone. Paul, what are your thoughts on that, Paul?
Well, I mean, Patrick and Terry have touched on a couple of really important things, and that is how we disperse ourselves within the parks and trails. That's a key. But I think there's good news in all of this. During this whole COVID experience, we have found that on our OPA forum, there was the largest amount of interaction between parks and trail professionals than we've had in a very long time. We've had politicians now understanding at a much greater level of what these green spaces provide for their constituents and just how important they are to the health and well-being of Ontarians. And so, and Terry said it very well when she said, the behavior of our users will determine how successful we are at reopening all of our various parks and trail amenities. The other thing that has happened that is good is that our users now are more informed. They know now what they should be doing as far as physical distancing. They also now have a greater appreciation for how important it is to get out and to be able to access the green spaces. And I think what you're going to see, and we're going to try to promote, is find a new trail, find a new park. Don't just go to the park you always went to. I know Terry goes to so many different trails. I think she's trying to hit 100 and she's at 52 different trail experiences. And that is a very positive thing for parents and children to do together, is to not just go to the same park that you always went to. find a new green space, find a new park that has different amenities, possibly a river, a stream, a forest, a grove of trees, rocks, different, different things that will inspire children and parents to learn more about nature. That's what our living green space is out there for. And I think the behavior and the change in knowledge that our users will be receiving over this experience is going to bring them to a greater level of appreciation for our green space. And in the end, just be kind. It's good for your health.
Thanks, Paul. That was very well said. And we have a lot of good things coming out of this. We're all facing challenges and through this very unique period we're going through, but there's going to be a lot of, I think, good things coming out of this with kindness, working together, and understanding and respecting each other. And as everyone has said, just experiencing the rich and diverse trails and parks infrastructure we have in the province. So there's lots of good things we can do. But I just want to close by thanking all of you for taking the time. I thank you on behalf of McMaster University and personally for sharing your thoughts. And it was very informative. I know we'll all benefit from your thoughts and experiences. So once again, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Wayne. Just one thing. Just be sure to check out the Hike Ontario website in order to follow up on ways to be your best possible hiker. And I would encourage you to go to Ontario Trails to learn about the fundamentals of trail etiquette. All of the groups on the call, we all have educational materials that are there for people to download and to use. There's a lot of stuff about knowing before you go out. And if you know what to expect before you head out with the kids or with the family, it'll just make for a better, safer experience overall.
Great. Good closing remarks. Thank you, Patrick. And once again, thanks, everyone. Okay.
Nice to see you, Paul.
Take
Nice to see
care.
you, Terry.